Hello, everyone, and welcome. As was mentioned, this is going to be a presentation on what's new in Creo Illustrate 6.1. And with that, we're going to be spending most of the time in software. So we'll be going through an individual slide and then spending the rest of our time in software. And as was mentioned, as we go through each topic, go ahead and type in your questions and we will answer them at the end of each individual topic as opposed to waiting until the end. So the first new capability we have up is adding decals to 3D parts. So this is a new capability that allows you to add, in essence, a small texture, a raster image to an individual part on a particular surface that you've selected so that you can add additional information or additional realism, if you will, to your 3D parts. So if you have cautions and warnings or descriptive information, data plates, things of that nature that you want to add on to the part, you can do that. There are a couple of limitations in this first release. So one of them is right now you're looking at one decal per part. You can have multiple decals obviously within an assembly, but each part can only have one decal. We are working on the capability to have multiple decals per part, but for right now it's just one decal, one part. The other limitation is you need to be careful when you are optimizing the 3D geometry for delivery. If you decimate the model too much, in essence reduce the quality of the geometry too much, basically the surface that attached to goes away, in which case your decal will no longer display. It's not that it will show up someplace that it shouldn't, it just won't display at all. So we've such a way that if the surface information is too decimated, the decal just won't, as opposed to it showing up in some random far off or upside down or something like that. So just keep that in mind. Another one is that the decals right now are not set up so that they will become part of a vector image. So if you're going to SVG or CGM, the decals will not. If you're doing a pure black and white line art kind of thing. They do show up in raster images. You can use them inside of a sequence or animation, and then when you output that to video, those kinds of things, the decals are still there. But if you're going to a vector-based format, the decals potentially will go. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that works. So that when you're applying a decal, the geometry needs to be aware of its own surfaces. So if you're using something that is just a mesh, the decal doesn't have a place to attach to because it's actually attached to the surface of a surface. And if there isn't an actual surface there, there isn't anything for us to attach to. Same thing if, as if you over decimate a model and it becomes just a mesh, then there for the decal, where the decal thinks it should be doesn't exist anymore. So you need to keep that in mind when applying these decals. But we just go up here to the decal tool, add decal. Now, if you already have decals added to a library, in this case, then you get this dialog. If you don't, which out of the box, you won't have any decals, you'll basically get an open dialog box allowing you to go to a particular location and pull in a raster image, that kind of thing. So depending on how you have it set up, I happen to have some decals set up in here, and I even have different categories so I can see my warnings and general information. So in this case, if I wanted to put this warning label on a part here, I would just select that label and I would go insert. It's now put me inside the decal tool, so I can select a part. Notice I have a part selected. Now, in essence, I'm selecting the location on that part that I want to add this. Now, right now, you're not seeing the decal. That's because I need to tell it what kind of surface this actually is. So I'm going to turn on my use mapping shapes, and you can see that this is applying the decal, but it's applying it in sort of an odd way. It's seeing that this is a surface, but I need to tell it what kind of surface so that when I move this up and down like this, it's not blending into itself. So if I go to my mapping shapes, instead of it being a plane, in this particular case, I would rather it be a cylinder. So I'm going to choose cylinder. But I'm not sure if you can see it in the video. There's a ghosted cylinder here that is actually vertical. So in essence, its long axis is vertical at the moment. But I want to rotate that. So I'm just going to get my rotation tool. And you can use the same capability as far as a direct type. I hit enter, and now my cylinder has been rotated 90 degrees, and I can just click OK. And now when I move this, notice that it stays, or it's not trying to blend. I can rotate it all the way around the model and basically put it wherever I want. I can scale it up and down. I can grab the blue ring and rotate it, all of those kinds of things. The little black arrow is showing you, in essence, what direction it sees the face that you put this on. And if this is all that I want, I can go ahead and click Apply. And if I click Apply, it leaves me in the tool, and now it's set so that I can just go, okay, well, let me choose another decal. And I could choose another decal. I would have to choose a different part. Again, I can only have one decal per part. So I would have to choose a different part to put a different decal on. But it allows you to stay in the tool, so if you have several different decals that you want to apply to different parts within an assembly, that kind of thing, you can do that. If I clicked OK, it would have applied the decal and then just exited out of the tool. Now you also have the ability to edit a decal, which in essence takes you right in here. I can go ahead and select that and select the decal and be able to move it, resize it, all of those kinds of things. If I needed to change the mapping shape for whatever purpose, I could do that. So once you've placed the decal, you do have the ability to go back in and edit it, manipulate it however you need to. So next up is the use of the page definition for video output. So for a while now, you've been able to create videos, output from an animation. In the last release, we added the ability to output a sequence as individual video steps so that each individual step within a sequence could be output as an individual video, or the entire sequence as a complete video. Now what we've done here is added the ability to use a page definition that would actually allow you to specify the viewable area that you want to have for that video. So what we're deriving from that page definition is, in essence, the height-width ratio. So if you wanted to do something that was 16 by 9 or 4 by 3 or something like that, you would need to make sure that you've defined a page size that has that height-width ratio, so that your videos output at the ratio that you want them to output at. And once you've specified that, then even when you publish these videos out, we adhere to that. Now, for those that weren't aware of it, you can also use that same page definition if you wanted to output one of your 3D images as raster. We can use that same page definition to limit that down. So again, with the last release of Creo Illustrate 6.0, we gave you the ability in the sequencer to output multiple individual still images from a sequence. So using this, you can now use that to crop both those still images as well as the video to have those match, so that if in some circumstances you're outputting the video for delivery on a platform that may not support live 3D playback, or you need to put 2D raster images or something like that into a PDF or a Word doc, during one publish run, you can publish all of those formats now and have all of their sizes and views match. So with that, we will take a quick look at that in Illustrate. So I am already in a sequence here. So if I go to figures, you can see I can apply a size. We'll just go in and we'll use a half letter size, and I can change my orientation to a landscape. You'll notice that it's already updating down here. So now if I go into an individual step, I can reposition my camera. Best practice would be to actually apply this definition first, so that as you go through to create these individual steps, you're building your scene so that the parts that you are interested in stay inside of that. So if I change this back and forth, you can see these parts are staying inside that scene space. If I go and check this one, you see that it's doing the same thing. All the parts I'm interested in, all the labels I'm interested in, all of that kind of thing are staying in the scene. This one, depending on what you want, you might want to adjust it a little bit, being as this is cropping outside. So that may just require a quick adjustment, readjusting the labels and so forth to make sure that those stay inside. But when you output a 2D image or video, and technically, yes, video is a 2D image, I know that, but we will crop the image along that page definition so that you can keep things nice and clean. You can make sure that your outputted video or outputted 2D images fit into the space that you've defined in your document or on your web page or whatever that may be. So, do we have any questions specific to using the page definition for video output?
Still no questions. So if you have any questions, please type them in, and we will answer them as we go along here throughout the session.
Okay. Now, for those that are not aware, you can define these page sizes. If you look in the installer guide, there's actually a section in there that explains how to create your own page definition sizes. So you can look at that. Just a little sneak peek at the future. Yes, we are planning to move that into the user interface so that you would be able to dynamically create your own page sizes without editing an XML file.
Hi, Jeff. Actually, one question did come in. He said he asked about how to define the page sizes.
Yes, yeah, and that's in the install guide. So if you go in there, there's a whole section on it. All of those customizable tweaks you'll find inside the installer's guide. Because in the beginning we looked at those as more of an admin style function where you wouldn't necessarily want individual users just randomly creating their own page sizes and things of that nature. But with the feedback that we've been getting, apparently people want to do that. So we are going to add that into the user interface so that you can define your own page sizes as you need them.
So he said, okay, so I have to ask the admin to do it. I can't edit during install?
There's nothing locking the XML file that contains the page size definition. You just need to have access to the rules inside that installer guide. The installer guide itself comes with the install pack for Creo Illustrate. So there's like a 1 gigabyte download zip that they get from the website. Inside of there, in multiple languages, is an installer guide that will walk you through how to do those custom tweaks. It's not specifically something that happens as you install Creo Illustrate. These are just how to get into the fine-tuning of Creo Illustrate in the XML files that drive Creo Illustrate from the backside. All right. So this next one, we are continuing to update the direct connection between Creo Illustrate and Windchill. For those that are not aware, Creo Illustrate with, I believe it was 4.2, initiated a direct connection capability that allows Creo Illustrate to directly talk to Windchill without going through the workgroup manager. Now we have been maturing that over the years. With this release, we've added several new capabilities, or I should say fine-tuned several capabilities. One of the issues we had prior to this release was we were using Windchill itself as the only place the content was saved. Unfortunately, what that introduced was with every time you saved, it would iterate the C3DI file. So you would end up with, 100 iterations just because somebody was saving every 15 minutes or something of that nature. So what we've done is now when you do a save using the direct connection, it's actually saving to a temp location on the local machine, and it only does the check-in to Windchill when you actually close the file or close Creo Illustrate. So if you go File New, or you hit the red X up in the upper right corner to close out of the application, Creo Illustrate will do a final save, upload, and check-in of the C3DI file that you had open. There are some other things that we've done in this regard as well. You now have the option to define whether or not you want to check it out on open. So as you can see here, you do have always try to check it out, always open it as read only, or just always ask me so that I can make the determination on a per file basis. And this same thing works, well, the checkout only works for the C3DI file. There is no reason to check out a piece of source data, such as a PVZ, that you're opening to actually create your illustrations from. But it does help speed things up so that you're not constantly pushing data back up every time you do a Control S, or if you have the autosave feature on, so it's saving locally. Now, as part of that, we do use Creo Illustrate's local crash recovery capability. So as you are creating your illustrations, Creo Illustrate is in essence logging that so that if Creo Illustrate were to crash, or you were to lose your connection or something of that nature, you still have your local copy. Creo Illustrate, once you've restarted it, will see that and understand that, hey, this actually came from Windchill, reestablish that connection, and allow you to then, check that file back in if that's what you wanted to do. Now, as part of this, we have also added another capability which allows you to open from Windchill. So if you are in the standard Windchill interface, and I'll bring that up here for just a second, you can see here I'm on a C3DI file. If I go under Actions, Open In, you can see we have Open in Creo Illustrate. Now this is new to Windchill, so this is in 11.2.1, which is the release that just released, or is just releasing this month anyway. But this would allow you to open that C3DI file directly from here. So if you were in Windchill and you found the piece of content that you were looking for, you now have the ability to just open it, and then in essence Windchill pushes to Creo Illustrate instead of you having to go through the normal open dialog boxes and that kind of stuff. Now, just to show an example of that, this particular file that I have here is actually that file we were looking at in Windchill. So when I save, it is not doing anything. It's just going to be one of those days. There we go. You can still see it's 8.2. But if I go in here and let's say do a file new where it closes it, and then we go back here. I'll actually need to give Creo Illustrate. It actually shows your progress now down here as well, that you are re-uploading. And that's complete. And now if I do this, you see now it's 8.3. So saving now every time does not iterate it. But when you close the file, if you had it checked out, then it will do that iteration. Now, again, a little piece of forward-looking information. We are bringing back the Windchill ribbon so that when you're using the direct connection, if you want, you can have direct capability to say if you want that file checked in or checked out, or undo checkout, things of that nature. So those are some of the things that you can be looking forward to for the direct connection in that regard. So with that, do we have any questions related to the direct connection?
Actually, a few questions came in. Let me start from the top. When you export the current image, will the stuff outside parts of the illustration show up in the exported CGM SVG?
So, okay. So for the page definition stuff, they want to know if that crops the 2D image as well. That's what it sounded like anyway. So yes, that is in essence, a bounding box that we abide by. If you are getting a different result, please let me know. That should have been working up until this point. But if you are getting a different result, please make sure that you are submitting any trouble tickets.
They said, what if you just exit without closing? Will it upload?
Yes. Creo Illustrate will not actually shut down until it has finished the operations. So even if you go up here and kill it, well, I should say if you close it using this button, then yes, Creo Illustrate will tidy itself up. It will make sure the file is saved, uploaded. You'll get the standard, do you want to save this work kind of dialogue that you would normally get if you're just closing the application. If you've saved it, then it will go through a save operation, then upload that file, check it back in, and then exit out of the application. If you've made changes that you saved but haven't saved your most recent changes and you say no, it still knows that you made changes and will still upload and check back in the file. If you did not make any changes and you close out of the application, we recognize the fact that you did not do any changes, and then we'll just undo the checkout, that kind of thing. So we tried to automate that as much as possible. Now, if you go into like your task manager and kill Creo Illustrate, no. Creo Illustrate does not get the opportunity to tidy itself up and upload things and that kind of stuff. So, don't do that.
Okay. Another question, back to the templates page size question. Can you set your template as a default one when opening the program?
Not yet. We are enhancing some of those capabilities for templates, light scenes, or not templates, but page size, light scenes, stuff like that, that will allow you to define what you want as your default state, so that when you start the application, it will there will already be a default page size selected, a default light scene selected, and things of that nature. So we are looking at doing enhancements to the general, how do I want my figure to be when I start creating a figure? We are looking into how to best do that. So you can look forward to changes in that regard in the future as well.
Okay, another question, is it clear to others that files have been checked out? Does it, is there a lock symbol to show in Windchill?
Yeah, so you get the standard symbol up here next to the little file cabinet that says, hey, this has been checked out. So there's nothing different inside the Windchill interface beyond that standard capability that shows you that this is a checked out piece of content.
Okay, Creo Illustrate version 6.0 and 6.1 are direct connection only. That's a question. And what version of Windchill do we need to be running?
So 6.1, 6.0, 5.1, 5.0, if you're using direct connection, you can go all the way back to 11.0 M30. That's one of the reasons we actually created the direct connection, is so that we, the Creo Illustrate team, could actually have more control over what versions of Windchill Creo Illustrate could connect to. Because we do realize that an updated version of Creo Illustrate is not necessarily enough of a compelling event to upgrade Windchill. So we wanted to give you guys some better flexibility as far as what versions of Windchill you're able to connect to with Creo Illustrate. The goal is to be compatible with the same versions of Windchill that the Creo View, which is in essence the sister application with Creo Illustrate that provides all the viewing. So whatever versions Creo View supports on the Windchill side, we want that same support capability with Creo Illustrate. So now, in some instances, that would mean that you would at least have to install a CPS or a critical patch set that would enable that companion viewing level. But in general, just having 11.0 M30 will give you that support with the direct connection all the way up to the release coming out this month.
Okay, another question, will the release of 6.1 in your opinion, what percentage of IsoDraw functionality is now available in Creo Illustrate, just a rough estimate, and when will it all be available and we can plan to remove IsoDraw?
So that's an excellent question, and as I'm sure for everybody, that is going to be a little bit different. I don't see it so much as 100% or 50, 75, 100%, because everybody's use of how they use IsoDraw is a little bit different. So for some customers, we may already be at 100%. For others, we may be at 10%. I really couldn't say specifically. In 6.0 and 6.1, we have not added any new 2D authoring capabilities. So what was released with 5.1 is still the top tier, but right now we spent a couple of years focusing on that 2D, and right now we are focusing back onto the 3D and interconnectivity, so to speak, like the changes we've done for connecting to Windchill and that kind of thing. So we're focusing primarily on that for this release and for the next release. but we'll have to see going forward when we'll continue our efforts to add more 2D capability. So, if you have Creo Illustrate Professional, you have all of the 2D capability that is available, assuming you have 5.1 or higher. And I would leave it up to each individual customer or user to define, is that the level of 2D capability that I need for my use case? To be clear, there is not necessarily an intention to move 100% of the ISODraw capability over. There are a lot of things that made sense 20, 30 years ago that don't necessarily make sense today. So we will probably never do a 100%, but by the same token, there are things that Creo Illustrate does in the 2D side that ISODraw cannot. So it is, it's not a direct apples to apples kind of a comparison. As we create that 2D capability in Creo Illustrate, we're also looking at what makes sense today and what can we do today that we may not have been able to do 20, 30 years ago.
We do have a couple more questions. Should we get to those questions, or do you want to cover a little more material first?
Well, if they're on the material we're covering now, that's fine. If they're orbital questions, so to speak, let's go ahead and finish what we're doing. We've got one more slide to go through, and then we can open it up to more generalized questions.
Okay, let me just pose this question here. I'm not sure if it's related to the stuff that we've covered yet. It says, if we have a C3DI saved locally, not in the temp folder, are we able to store that in WC? What does not working, I guess it's not working in 5.1? That's not currently working in 5.1 is what I think they said.
That we would have to look at. Actually, this C3DI file right here exists on my local desktop, and not 10 minutes before we started this presentation, I just used Creo Illustrate's standard save as dialog, pointed it into Windchill and saved it. So yes, you can do that. The caveat is that if you link content in, like if you're using the associativity and you linked something into this C3DI from your local machine, Windchill is not necessarily going to be aware of that. The C3DI will still be aware of it, but Windchill itself will not. So best practice would be, if you're going to have stuff in Windchill, that you start it there. But even in 5.1, you should be able to save a C3DI, but most likely you'll have to do in essence, a file save as to save it up to Windchill as a different, as far as Creo Illustrate is concerned, that's a different file than the one you had on the local machine.
Okay. There were a couple. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you finishing?
I was just going to say, if it's not working for you that way, please submit a ticket so that we can take a closer look at it and find out why. But like I said, at least I can definitely verify in 6.1 it's working, because that's how I got this file into Windchill.
Okay. There was a couple related questions to the question that what if you just exit without closing? Will it upload? It said, will it be able to recover from that and more or less, from a crash?
Yes. So Creo Illustrate, we simplified it, so to speak, so that because you're saving a temp file locally, or every time you save, you're saving to a temp location. Creo Illustrate, in essence, is seeing that as just any other file on your local machine. It just happens to be in the temp location that Creo Illustrate defined. So if Creo Illustrate crashes, when you restart it, Creo Illustrate is aware that you had that file open, and it is also aware that that file came from Windchill. So you'll get the standard dialog that comes up now that for the crash recovery stuff that says, hey, you have this other file sitting here. Do you want to, pick up where you left off with it. And if you say yes, that you want to do that, then it will reopen that file. It will relog you into Windchill and all of that good stuff. And then from that point, you should just be able to close the file normally, at which point then the file will get pushed back up and checked back in and all of that good stuff. So on the Windchill side, basically Windchill is just sitting there waiting for somebody to tell it what to do with the file. So with Creo Illustrate crashes, Windchill isn't necessarily aware of that. The file is just still checked out. Worst case scenario, if the file is checked out and for some reason Creo Illustrate cannot do that, then you could just come in here and, either, well, in this case it's not checked out, but you would get the option to cancel the checkout or check it back in and things of that nature. So the standard workflows in Windchill would still apply to that. But Creo Illustrate does try to clean up after itself as best it can.
Great. Well, let's move on, and then we'll get back to a few more questions after you present the rest of your material here.
Okay. So, last but not least, with Windchill 11.2.1, which is the one releasing this month, but please note this little caveat here. This capability within Windchill will not be available until Q1. What this does is this allows you to have Windchill do the publishing. So all you're doing now is just pushing the C3DI file back up to Windchill. So you no longer have to have it do that work on your local machine. You're just pushing it back up to Windchill, then Windchill goes through and applies the same publish settings that you applied in Creo Illustrate, and it publishes that content out in such a way that it is now more accessible to other workflows within Windchill. So even if you are publishing, raster, video, vector, as obviously 3D as well, all of that content is now in a more standardized way to be picked up by other workflows that you might have inside of Windchill. So you would, in essence, be able to go in and see the CGM without it being inside of a PVZ file or the video files or, that kind of stuff. So when you go into Creo Illustrate and you set up your connection to the server, the option here is what specifies that. You can still publish on the client side. So for those of you that aren't moving to 11.2.1 in the next 30 days or so, you would still be able to publish client side and have it publish up to Windchill, the same as always. But we have now implemented this. In essence, this C3DI publishing capability is handled within Windchill the same way as most of the other CAD adapters are. It's a worker that sits there when Windchill says, hey, I want you to convert this C3DI to whatever the C3DI says to be converted to. The C3DI file gets sent to this new publishing. It is published into the various formats, and then those formats are attached to the C3DI file, and there you go. Unfortunately, I can't show you this today, but it does work. My sample server, for some reason, I don't know, Monday hasn't been going well for me today, so for some reason it's not working today. So, but it is a development build, so they probably did something on the development side to test things, and yeah, so it's not functioning quite the way that it should today. And with that, does anybody have any questions on being able to publish C3DIs to your various other formats in Windchill?
So I'll just go from the top. I'm not sure if it applies to this or the material covered earlier. Can we continue using Workgroup Manager with 6.1 and 6.0?
Can you? My question back would be, what is not in the direct connection that you need? So for anybody that is asking that question, I would like to have a discussion, because we are trying to gather more information on what is missing from the direct connection that the Workgroup Manager is providing you, so that we can make sure that we're adding the right capabilities in. So that's the best answer I have at the moment. So if you would like to set up, in essence, a one-on-one chat with me, just let Melissa know in the chat or in your question, and I would be more than happy to discuss that and see what we can do to make it work the way that you need it to work.
Okay, yeah, I have the person's name, so we can reach out and touch base offline. Another question came in. So the linking there is C3DI to desired published output.
So in Windchill, so if I go back here, and I went into related objects, assuming that my post-publishing on this server was working, I would have a representation posted here that would represent all of those various formats that I wanted to publish to. Now, I still, as I've mentioned before, I still need to specify in Creo Illustrate what those formats are. We will be working on that so that Windchill can control what is published and when, so that in future, if we come out with a new format, you could actually just tell Windchill to, hey, republish all this stuff in this new bizarre thing that was just invented. But for right now, it is still relying on your settings that you put into Creo Illustrate, which are also saved inside the C3DI itself. And so when the C3DI arrives in Windchill, Windchill tells the worker to convert this. The worker looks at the C3DI file, gets the publishing rules, publishes that content out, and then reattaches everything to the C3DI file.
Okay, ready for next question?
Sure.
Is it possible to create part list image callouts without WGM?
So my assumption is you're talking about using the Windchill service parts capability, where you are creating a parts list in Windchill and then pushing that content to Creo Illustrate to actually create the illustration.
Yeah, I guess their modified question is it possible to create part list image callouts automatically without WGM? I guess that's the modified question.
To be honest, I would have to see exactly what it is you're doing, because there are so many different ways of doing things in the whole Windchill relationship. I don't just want to say yes or no without seeing exactly what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it.
Okay, we can touch base offline to get clarity. Okay, another question. I don't know what kind of document to enable in search in Windchill to see if C3DI file on search. If I can direct publish, I don't need to know how to create it.
Well, the C3DI itself is a dynamic document, or basically, it's an EPM document that's classified normally, this is out of the box, as a dynamic document. Again, Windchill is very customizable. I don't. That is generally how you would do it, but if you've modified that, then that wouldn't necessarily work. So in your environment, we would need to see what did you classify the C3DI as, so that we can make sure that you're searching for it in the proper way.
So we said a dynamic document just like IsoDraw?
Yes, yes. They actually use the same workflows. It's just one is, in essence, heavy on the 3D side, light on the 2D, whereas IsoDraw is heavy on the 2D, light on the 3D. But we try to keep their workflows within Windchill as parallel as we can, just to make it easier. But yes, they are both dynamic documents within the Windchill system.
Okay, another question. So will Creo Illustrate have its own publishing rules?
Well, it has its own publishing rules today that are defined within Creo Illustrate. So if you go down here, I'm just in Creo Illustrate's option dialog. If I go to illustration, I've got publishing, I've got 3D figures, and I've got 2D figures. 2D figures is available if you are using Creo Illustrate Professional, because that's the only one that actually allows you to create 2D figures. But in here is where you would specify, like if I go in here to edit this, I can choose what format do I actually want to output this 3D file or 3D figure as. 2D illustrations, image, movies. Then I can also choose various formats here within that category. So if I go to 2D illustration, my options change. If I go to image, my options change again. If I go here, I get that. So depending on what you want to output as, and like for 3D, if I'm using Creo View, then I also have the option of choosing a recipe file, but I have to tell Creo Illustrate where those are to begin with. And then if I take a look on the 2D side, and I go in here and do the same thing, you'll see that I only have 2D formats. I can't output a 2D file as, you know, as a 3D or a video, because it doesn't make sense because it's not actually moving. But you get those same capabilities that you did on the 3D side, on the 2D side as well. But you can, the nice thing is like I say this file here, I need to output it in multiple formats. I can say add, and if I do this, and I say I want to output that as a video, I can choose format, get rid of that. If it's a sequence, I can say I want each step as a separate video. I can add padding, so I can have, in essence, a little bit of a pause at the beginning and end of the video, so that when the video loads, it's not, things aren't moving immediately. People have a chance to see the image before stuff starts flying around on the screen. And then I can specify, you know, frames and all that kind of stuff. And so I click OK, and now I have that. I can add another one. Let's say I want to do images. Maybe I want to do PNG files. And I can just label this. This is just a text string. This would help if I knew how to spell PNG. There we go. So I can specify my units, you know, all of this good stuff. I can even, for raster images like this, if they're callouts, I can even output a callout map. If my file was in multiple languages, I could put out an individual PNG for each language, for each figure, and so on. So I can set up all of this stuff. And now when I publish out, I can specify which figures I want to have. This is where you would specify your recipe files, by the way. So whatever recipe files you want for your 3D. But I could say, like, say I had 10 figures. 3 of them I want to also have PNG files. 4 of them want to have videos and whatnot. We give you the ability to specify what each figure should be published out as. So you can, you know, you could even have multiple types of PNG, not just one, but you could have 4 or 5 different PNGs. So maybe you've got one set up so that it turns out, you know, something small enough to be a thumbnail versus the full-size image, and so on and so on. So it's pretty flexible in that regard. But these rules that you set up here, these are the rules that Windchill follows today. In future, we are looking at giving Windchill the ability, or the authority, I guess you could say, to use standard publishing rules within Windchill to define all of this stuff, so that you could more dynamically change, the PNG format that I've requested is wrong, or, you've gone through and created 10,000 images like this, and now you decide you also want to do SVG. Now what? So Windchill would be able to add SVG and then republish everything to include the SVG files and so on. That capability doesn't exist today. That's something that we're looking at for the future, as far as letting Windchill say, here's a new format that I want you to output as.
Okay.
So, any other questions?
Yeah, has the spatial placement been fixed to address parts opening out of place?
Not ringing a bell right off the top of my head. So if you have a trouble ticket that you've submitted, please send that along to Melissa so that she can get it forwarded to me, and I will take a look at that and we can get back to you. But off the top of my head, I don't know.
Okay. How robust is the 3D PDF publishing?
What was that again?
How robust is the 3D PDF publishing?
So the 3D PDF publishing is basically just the static exploded state of the 3D image. There's no animation or anything of that nature. Your best use case in that regard would be something more along the lines of outputting U3D. And the server-side publishing stuff now supports outputting a U3D, so you could actually set up a process that would allow you to take that U3D through, say, the Arbortext publishing process and be able to create a 3D PDF in that regard. But it's still just static 2D. We're not incorporating 3D into the PDF or the U3D at this point. But you can still see things like the structure, depending on how you set it up inside your PDF. You could still see the individual model parts and that kind of thing. But it's not something we're focused on, to be quite honest. We had a few people requested it, but we're more focused on live 3D. That's one of the reasons we created the WebGL capability that allows you to embed a 3D viewer in any web page, displayed basically now on any platform, so that you don't have to do that. One of the detractors, at least to me, as far as something like PDF is concerned, is it's nearly impossible to control. The same thing that makes them easy to distribute makes them impossible to control. So if I make PDF available for somebody to download or view, PDF viewers themselves allow them to save a local copy, which means now I do not have control, and I am now relying on them to go back and check and see, are they still using the most current version? Whereas if it's a web page, then every time they go back to the web page, even within the same session, they're going to get whatever's the latest and greatest that has been published and I want them to have access to. So we don't focus a whole lot on the PDF type of scenario within Creo Illustrate.
Okay, another question. Will changing the publishing rules allow the MPM Link to pull a specific view from a C3DI?
So MPM Link, or basically any other process within Windchill, would be able to pull a particular figure and a particular file type for that figure, depending on what it is you've published out. It would still be on the MPM Link side to make sure that they're pulling the right figure. We just create the figure, it's there, but now potentially, and I don't know if MPM Link has updated to match it, but in essence, the data is there from the C3DI, but we do not control all these other processes that may access it to do stuff. It's stored in Windchill in a standard method that Windchill stores that connected data. But how these other areas within Windchill are accessing it and using it, that is still up to those different areas to do that.
Okay, this is regarding, maybe something for a further topic in the future. It's how to interchange data between viewables created in Creo Illustrate and annotate sets created in Creo View, as well as how to combine the efforts into one output within the 3D workspace. I guess that wasn't covered today. Is there somewhere they can get some more information on how to do those things?
So my assumption is you're talking about, in essence, creating a Creo Illustrate illustration, bringing that output from Creo Illustrate into Creo View, marking that up, and I'm not clear if that's referring to then bringing that back into Creo Illustrate or saving that as some other piece of content to go, in essence, downstream from Creo View. So basically just saving.
It's just into Windchill.
So to be honest, I'm not sure, because the illustrations coming out of Creo Illustrate are a specific thing that is not the same thing as an annotation set in Creo View. So I would need to leave that one to Robbie Morrison, who is the product manager for Creo View, to understand and decide the use case around, in essence, repurposing a Creo Illustrate illustration as the starting point for an annotation set that would then be saved out of Creo View as an asset in Windchill.
Okay, maybe that's something we can get back to
Yeah.
this person on.
Yeah, that's crossing multiple barriers, or we shouldn't say barriers, but multiple applications within our suite, and so we need to look at that whole thing in that way.
Okay. Well, I think that's it for questions then. I think we got to almost all the questions, and I know there's a few that we need to follow up on, so I will get a report and we'll reach out to those people individually. I did want to mention that the next event that we're going to be at is at the PTC User Technical Community Winter Open Forum in Scottsdale, Arizona, and that's January 28th and 30th. If you go to our website on ptc.com, the Arbortext website, you'll see I keep the events updated, so you'll see, some things have just concluded, like today's webinar. We had an Arbortext user group in Frankfurt, Germany last week. So as more events get scheduled, I will be pushing them onto the website. So if there's any more questions, just feel free to reach out to myself, Melissa Wagner. So I'm mwagner@ptc.com. Otherwise, you can respond to the WebEx invitations that you received. Is there any closing comments that you'd like to make, Jeff, before we wrap things up today?
Just to thank everyone, and I will be at the TCs in Scottsdale. So if you want to stop by, I think I have, for Creo Illustrate, I've got like a 90-minute session set up there. So if you want to have some deeper discussions, either in that meeting or in the hallway kind of stuff, I will see you there.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time, and thanks everyone for joining. Like I said, this was recorded and will be posted on YouTube, and I will be sending out the presentation slides at that time. I'll let you know as soon as it's been posted. Thanks everybody, and have a great day.